This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Let's talk a little bit about your least favorite hotel room. You had to have had a nightmare hotel situation at some point over the years. So if we're not going to say what was the worst town, surely you've got a worst hotel experience.
You bet. Okay, Fit Family and I, producers for a show, Springfield, Springfield, Massachusetts. Okay, it was at the time of year when you have probably May, because it was graduation, was in town that night. High schools were graduating. There was a couple of dances. There was a convention of some sort. Now, keep in mind, over the years, and this era included, I always would sit down 2 or 3 weeks out, book my Marriott hotels across the board for all the towns that I was going to be coming to. For some reason, I was just thinking, it's going to be a Friday night, which notoriously the business travelers go home. You can usually get a Marriott, no issues, Friday night. Well, everything was booked. Finley and I we start calling and shows letting out, and I still haven't found a room. And as it turned out, the closest room was about 80 miles away. So, we look at each other and go, now, do we really want to go 80 miles the wrong way and have to come back that 80 miles tomorrow and then have another 150 miles to drive wherever the town was? Let's just go to some other hotel. So we're riding around and we see this mom and pop hotel, and hey, you want to give it a try? Well, we don't have any other options. I fumbled, Fit. I'm sorry. I always book the rooms for us. I shit the bed here big time. So we go in and ring the bell. It's almost like, I didn't even know those still existed. Ding, ding, ding. Out walks a 10-year-old kid. And so I go, excuse me, is your parents here? Is there an adult here? I'll check you in. So, okay, hold it right there. Do you have rooms? Yes, we have. How many do you need? I said, we need 2 rooms. He says, yes, I have 2 rooms. So he hands us the sheet of paper and we fill it out. We hand him the paper back. He says something along the lines of, you took the last 2 rooms. You're very lucky. Everything is booked solid from here to so-and-so. So, I go, okay, yeah, I heard that. So I guess 10-year-old kid's saying it's got to be true. So we go park the car and we start heading to our room, and I'm looking at my door as I get to it, start to put the key in. There's an opening above the top of the door, and I don't know how you would describe it, but let's just say the door was supposed to be 6 feet. It was about 3 inches short. So there's about a 3-inch crack across the top of the door facing. And now this was, bug season, you name it, mosquito season. Open the door, mosquitoes flying around the room. So I'm spraying deodorant and all that shit, whatever will run them out. I look over, and there is actually above the bed on the wall, looks like somebody threw a bucket of blood.
Oh.
So there had been a murder of some sort or something go down in that room not too long ago. Now I'm looking around at the carpet, not clean. So that night I ended up throwing the top cover off the bed, laying on the sheet, which seemed to be clean, slept in my socks, walked around in my socks, air conditioner was rotten. It was probably the worst experience I've ever had on the road. So I don't think the hotel had a name.
It didn't have a name. That's the best part.
No. And we just called it Blood Manor after that. And I never made the mistake of heading to a town without a hotel reservation at a Marriott again.
You know, what's funny is, the few times you and I have had some sort of travel instance, you always start the conversation by saying, now I'm a Marriott guy. So now I know why you stick to the roads you know the best, because as a rule of thumb, the Marriott doors are going to shut and there's probably not blood on the wall.
3,000 plus stays later at a Marriott, I've never been disappointed. Thank you, Marriott. That's why I stay there.
Rob R writes in, Arn, what did you prefer, the TBS studios or center stage? And can you tell us the pros and cons of each?
Well, center stage was taped in the evening. I'm not a morning guy. TBS studios, we would fly in from somewhere on a private plane on Friday night after the show, which means we got in at 3 a.m. You had to be ready to rock and roll the next day at 9:30 a.m. in the studios. Now, they had softer couches and stuff to sit in. They had nicer dressing rooms and locker rooms for the guys. They weren't actually dressing rooms. It was just a bunch of couches and stuff, but had nicer shower area at TBS studios than center stage. But center stage was, well, when wrestling is its most effective, it was at night. So you'd have to be there at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which gave you the day to rest up, work out, do whatever you need to do before you got there. And then after we would start taping at around 10:30 or so. We would finish up around 12:30 at TBS studios. And then you had to head right straight to the airport because you had a show that night somewhere. So Saturdays were a tough day when we were doing the studios.
That's the same thing everybody says, man. Canadian Travis wants to know, is there a city you hated to visit when you were on the road? And if so, which one or ones did you dread to go to?
No, I never had any cities that I hated because they all, at the end of the road, were producing a living for me and my family. And that's the way you looked at it. And when you would get to a particular city, if it was difficult travel-wise and you were frustrated when you got there, the beauty was you got to go to the ring and take out your aggravation on your opponents in a working way and get rid of all that aggravation. So, if the houses were small and some of the towns we would go to, notoriously, you kind of knew about that in advance and you just took account that, okay, we're going to have a smaller crowd, but you know what? We're going to work as hard for these folks as we would if there was 10,000. So that's how you grow your audience. The people that are there are your most loyal fans, the ones that come when nobody else does, whether it's a Sunday afternoon show and it happens to be a holiday that day, or there's football games going on, or other things that they could choose to do. Maybe it's just a beautiful day outside. And when people have options and they choose to come to your wrestling event, man, you should feel so honored to work and perform for those people, as much or more than anybody else, because they came when nobody else did. And that was kind of the mentality that I always had, give them the extra if you can.
Let's keep it moving here. Sean wants to know, what is the biggest misconception that wrestling fans have about wrestling, or something that they think they know, but is actually completely wrong?
I think maybe they don't do this intentionally, but I think it's probably a misconception, or just fans aren't aware of it, is the travel involved on a tour just getting from town to town, and how many issues there are with traveling itself and how difficult it is, and flying to different places and then having to jump off a plane and grab a rental car and drive 200 miles and make all that happen and get there at a certain time so that you're there before a show. And then what happens if your flight gets canceled and now you got a 3 or 4 hour wait, which throws your entire day off. And now you're scrambling to have to fly to another town and get another car and drive because that airport's now closed or whatever the reason may be. The difficulty sometimes on tours that are involved with travel can be very, very trying and very nerve-wracking and dangerous. Because now you got guys that are late flying into a different town than they should have, jumping in a rental car and driving way too fast and way too reckless to make a show. And it just ups the danger level. And I just think that a lot of fans just kind of think there's a genie that blinks their eyes and we're suddenly in the town and it wasn't that big a deal and all that. But, travel is a real issue for Astor business travelers or anyone that travels on a regular basis. It can be a lot more difficult than anyone ever believed.
Let's talk a little bit about, I can't believe that we haven't talked about this before. This is from Jonathan. What was it like doing the Raw after the Royal Rumble 2015? The show was canceled due to weather, and they almost had to make that happen recently. What was it like trying to make a 3-hour Raw with no audience?
Now, when was this again?
It would have been 2015, right after the Royal Rumble. You may remember they had Dean Ambrose in the studio, and the show was canceled because of this incredible snowstorm. So they had to just make do. Everyone was stranded. Do you remember that show?
What city was that? Do you know?
I'm not sure. The show wound up being from the studio there in Stamford.
Okay. So we just ended up staying in the town, probably where the Rumble was, correct?
I was in Connecticut.
I mean, if we were snowed in and couldn't get to Raw to produce a show, that meant everybody just probably had to end up spending the day where we were.
Hartford, Connecticut is where it was supposed to be. A crazy snowstorm. And then, they even postponed the SmackDown taping. It was a travel.
Oh, wait a minute. You know what? Now I remember that. You know what we ended up having to do is we stayed in Hartford. We actually got there, I want to say the night before, but the snowstorm was so bad overnight that none of the fans could get there. There was nothing moving downtown. We were stuck there like 4 days.
Wow.
If that's the memory that I have, because we were staying there to do Raw and SmackDown, and we're actually going to have to do them a day, like SmackDown a day later or something. I don't know what it was, but we ended up having to stay there 4 days, and we were snowed in. Again, thank God we're at a Marriott. There at least had some food. And there was a Gold's Gym, believe it or not, that was about 1.5 miles down the road that we could tough it out, and they had plowed it. I guess enough gym members had raised hell that, they at least wanted to be able to work out. So they somehow had that path from the hotel to there plowed, and were able to get to the gym, which is the only thing that saved us. But yeah, we were stuck there 4 days in a snowstorm.
Mike Cohen writes, go ahead.
That's what I remember.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.